I remember coming across Help a Reporter Out back in 2015. We used to have an office in New York and everyone just used it. It was just an iconic brand. Everyone loved it. It was just useful. The journalists loved it. The PRs loved it. And I was so excited to hear that you've brought Harrow back. And I just wanted to sort of talk to you a little bit about what's happened since in the market. I mean, my journalist friends are still complaining, saying, what is wrong with you, PR folk? Why are you still spamming us? How many years we're telling you to, don't spam us, our inboxes are full. The journalists, there's not as many of them like there was back then. There's been some real changes in the last sort of 10 years. So what are PR professionals still getting wrong about what journalists need? I just can't believe we're still having this conversation. It's a bit cringe, but the problem is still there. And have you kind of like tweaked HARO? Or is it exactly the same that it was back in the day when I used to use it?
Yeah,
Because things have changed, context has changed. So tell us about that.
yeah. So I think that what do journalists want? Journalists, especially on HARO, want a source for a story. They don't want, you know, anything outside of that. A source for a story. And so if you think back to HARO's original founding, right around like 2007, 2008, it's the same exact problem that HARO is aiming to solve in 2025, which is that sourcing in an AI era is really difficult. It's an infinite problem that journalists face. And so what HARO is, it's a 3 times a day email newsletter that summarizes requests from journalists and puts that out to sources, and then sources can respond directly to reporters if they are a source for that story. And so I think that, like, yes, it's interesting. It's a cycle that keeps repeating in terms of irrelevant pitches, but the problem remains the same, and the solutions have definitely evolved. But HARO's one that we've brought back as of 2 months ago.
Are there just too many people selling? Like too many responses to those questions where it's odiously obvious what this person is trying to sell or accomplish by being
Yeah, I
quoted?
think that, like, some of the mistakes that I think we see, it kind of, we've developed, I mean, pun intended, the HARO acronym is a really good baseline for how PRs should pitch journalists on HARO. And what I mean by that is be helpful, be authentic, be relevant, and be on time. And, with being helpful, before you actually send your pitch, read it from the perspective of the journalist. Is this helpful? Is this adding value to the inbox? If yes, press send. If no, don't send. Authentic. We see so many people using AI to quickly pitch reporters, and reporters and journalists are very, very well aware of what's written by AI and what's not. So authentic is like, is this written by a human? Are you adding the baseline above what AI can actually produce? Relevance, we've actually had to put in a new feature into HARO, the thumbs up, thumbs down, asking a journalist with every pitch email, was this relevant to your request? And if they click on a thumbs down, there's a report that goes to us, we look into it, take appropriate actions, but that's probably the most common complaint that we hear from journalists is like, why are you pitching me this thing? I spent so much time getting the instructions and putting it exactly what I was looking for. Why would you send this to me? So being relevant and then on time is just, they need a source fast. So being able to respond quickly is pretty paramount as well.
It's interesting. It just seems like a lack of empathy. And I think I think that's why former journalists turned PRs, they kind of get it a little more because they know what it feels like to wake up to an inbox and you have to trawl through hundreds of emails to get ones that are relevant and that land. But it's quite soul destroying to sort of go through so many poorly written emails, let alone now, written by sort of ChatGPT. No shade on ChatGPT. I love it. But as you said, it is the baseline, and you know, life is
Yeah,
too short.
I think just to add on to that, the empathy of understanding who the person is on the other side. The coolest thing for me in terms of acquiring Help a Reporter Out and speaking with journalists who are using the platform and what they want from it is just understanding them, like understanding what their lives look like. And one of the most eye-opening things is I'll get on a call and I'll say, like, hey, I've been hearing a couple things, like many reporters have 1, 2, 3 different sources of income, and inevitably I'm seeing two hands go up in terms of the number of sources of income that they have, 8 or whatever it is. And if you think about that, just think about the day that a typical journalist has. They're writing 4 stories on deadline. They've got to go pick up their twins from school, and then they got to go support, whatever other hustles they have, writing their Substack or keeping that updated and things like that. So it's extremely deadline driven. There's a lot of stuff that's happening. So that's why you really have to focus on being helpful.
Love it. I just love it.
Is the whole definition of journalists changed? You mentioned that they're wearing a number of hats, and somebody mentioned on our podcast recently that yes, there are YouTubers, there are influencers, there are newsletter writers, except they're often also journalists, and they're writing for mainstream media. So is this whole definition kind of changed these days?
Definitely. I think where and how people want to be featured in 2025 is changing. And I think that PR professionals need to approach it from a marketing perspective in terms of you try it, you measure it, and you double down on the stuff that works. I think that there's some pretty clear metrics in a lot of these different channels and mediums. For example, a podcast. You get on the podcast and how many views did it get? Did you get any kind of traction from it? Did it work? Should you do more of it? So I think that PR professionals should just be asking themselves this question of try a channel, measure it, did it work, did it not? Continue, double down, and keep pushing in terms of what will work in 2025.
In addition to help a reporter out, you also have another platform, Featured. And I think that's kind of interesting because, again, I think it really sort of serves a need where journalists don't have that many resources. They don't have like huge teams like they used to have. And they increasingly, especially trade media, local media that don't really get those advertising budgets that they used to have because it's all gone down the social media sort of platforms, deep pockets, that they need sort of bylined articles, they need opinion pieces. And so that's actually a really beautiful marriage of actually PRs providing value to journalists. And so tell us about featured.com, like how, was that quite a recent phenomenon where you started realizing that actually this is what journalists need and actually to put journalists in the driving seat so that they're not getting pitched tons of ideas, but actually they can, in their own time, have a little browse on featured.com and say, you know what, I quite like that piece, I'll take that piece. I mean, it's a very civilized way of PRs and journalists sort of interacting. Tell us about that platform.
Yeah, definitely. So I started Featured in January of 22. And it was a result of running my agency for 10 years and figuring out how do I have 500 small business owners who need visibility in the media. How do you take the eyelash extension supply company and get them featured in a story? And so we started asking our clients questions that were relevant to their expertise. They would answer those questions and then we would get them featured in articles. And so there was a lot more traction with that than the agency. So sold the agency and then focused on Featured. And what Featured does is we connect subject matter experts with publishers to create high quality content. And so the types of content that we're creating via Featured are these expert roundup articles where a publisher will ask a question, we'll invite vetted experts to answer that question, we'll take the best answers, put that into an article, and give it to the publisher to publish on their website. So publishers are able to get free high quality content, and then experts are able to get that exposure. So that's one of the pieces of content. You mentioned byline articles. That's another thing that subject matter experts can do via Featured is they could write an article, they could submit it, they could select up to 5 publishers to pitch, and then the publisher who claims it first essentially can publish it on their website. So it's kind of cool. We're on a mission to unlock new knowledge, and we're seeing a lot of knowledge being shared via the platform.
I love that. And, I'm sitting in London, Doug's sitting in Calgary. Is this just US or, can us Brits get in on the action, Canadians, others? How's it going? For both platforms, actually, I'm interested.
Yeah, I'd say that the demographics mirror each other in terms of Featured.com and Help a Reporter Out. It's probably about 70% US based, probably about 15% UK, probably about 5% Australia and New Zealand, and then, whatever the other percentage is, that's the rest of the world. So it's definitely a global type of involvement.
Amazing.
When you either meet with journalists or get feedback from journalists, I'm a former journalist, and this whole concept of painting all journalists with the same brush, I can remember kind of bristling at that. We paint the gloss as in they have no time, they got to pick up the twins, they have 12 jobs, to pay the bill. Those are probably very, very true. But what are the more subtle nuances to journalists' personalities, their psychographics, their demographics? What are the things that make them different and unique? Because that would help me in making a pitch, right? Is understanding more about the individual and then probably compartmentalizing them. It's a big word for me to say. Subsequently.
Yeah, I
That's
think
such a great question. I just want to say, like, because actually I didn't even think about it, Doug, that the data that Brett has,
Yeah.
actually
It's
you have
killer.
this, yeah. I mean, spill the tea, as my teenage daughter says.
Yeah.
Yeah.
so. All right, thanks for the enthusiasm. I don't have the data readily available, but what I will say, just qualitatively, is I think that journalists are traditionally trained to not take things at face value. That you're seeing a lot of submissions where people expect to be copy pasted, put into a story, and the best journalists are not going to do that. They're
Some are more skeptical than others. Some are like the meter is going crazy.
Yeah, I think that by nature it's skepticism. You don't believe it until you can validate it and have some credentials and things of that nature. So us as a platform, we're trying to lean into some of the questions that journalists would naturally have, like, is this person who they say they are? Like having a profile verification check that allows that journalist to more confidently move quicker in terms of accepting that source for a story, or having more confidence of reaching out to that person for a follow-up. So I think that you're seeing skepticism, but also, which is rightfully so, but also just curiosity. And I think that that's really where you see the opportunity with a platform like HARO or Feature.com. That if you are helpful, you're authentic, you're relevant to the story, and you make a solid pitch, then the curiosity really peaks, and then that's when you can create really great stories and content.
And are some of them crankier than others? Some of them friendlier and some of them
Look,
crankier?
Doug, you're
Are
trying to
they
throw me
just
under
like
the bus,
us?
man. I'm trying to help a reporter out, not trying to make some enemies, man.
Okay, how do I help the cranky reporters out? If a reporter is more likely to be crankier, how do I make them less cranky?
Just get them across the finish line. Be the source that they could rely on for their story, so that they could put it to print. Like that's probably, I would be cranky too if I had 4 stories to write today, and I had to go through 200 emails in my inbox.
And what do you sense is the reporter to PR person ratio? In other words, how many journalists are asking for help versus how many people are offering help?
Yeah, I'd say dog years to double dog years in terms of the dog year
7
rate.
or 14 to 1.
Somewhere between 7 to 14 to 1 in terms of people who are pitching. Because what you're seeing in terms of that is, like,
Wow.
you have PR agencies who are doing pitching, but then you're also having a lot of small business owners try to do it themselves, and turning themselves and their own internal marketing departments into their own PR efforts. And so I think the ratio is really, really high in terms of people who want to be featured in the media. And as you mentioned, it's drastically changing in terms of the supply of journalists and content creators who need sources. So yeah, it's pretty off kilter, which is why personalization and matching people with the right opportunities is really paramount to making that connection
God.
successful.
So are you a bit like, sort of like Tinder for PR and journalists? Your sort of algorithm is like matching us, and
That's awesome.
I think, but you don't have to answer that, don't worry.
Well, I do think that it's like probably the most interesting challenge that we've been working on, in terms of you've got hundreds of thousands of expert sources who have knowledge to share. They need an outlet to share that knowledge, whether that's to be featured in the media, or whether that's just because they want to be helpful and they've got 20, 30 years of experience and they need to share that expertise. So I think that's really the unique point, is you're looking at things like job title and company and the answers that they've previously submitted, all these different data points that allow you to ask the right question to the right person at the right time.
Yeah, a couple of things. Well, first of all, I just can't get my head over like double dog years for like PRs versus journalists. I mean, I think PRs, we're like gremlins, just add water and we just start exploding. I mean, I just hope nobody starts putting us into the microwave. Now, my question was this. Back in the day, I mean, I'm quite old. What you see is more Botox. But back in the day, I used to take journalists out. I used to take them out for lunches. I took them out for a drink. We used to hang out. And whilst your platforms are super efficient, very time efficient, where's the relationship building side? Or is it just simply we'll make ourselves useful and that's the relationship value that we're giving? It's no longer here's a plate of pasta and I'll pick up the bill at the end of it. You know, it's more actually I'll make your job easier. And what
Yeah,
does that take away from the whole relationship side, which I always thought was quite magical?
I think it's a wonderful question. I think the relationships still exist
Hmm.
because, like, one PR agency put it best that 2008 was great in terms of the PR to journalist relationship. Like, that era was perfect. You're taking people out to lunch, you're using HARO, and it's like pure, it's gold, it's a great place. And I think those relationships still exist, but I
Hmm.
think that journalists just are more time strapped and they're asked to do a lot more with a lot less, and which puts their willingness to develop those relationships probably at a lower rate. So I think that from what I hear from journalists that I speak with, most definitely, like when they get a relevant pitch and they discover a relevant source, that's one of the motivations for using our platform is you get to essentially tap into this massive Rolodex of expert sources and you get to feature a few of them in a story, and then story by story, a journalist can grow their network and have reliable sources that they could go to, outside of posting on HARO or featured. So the relationship still exists, but I think it goes back to it takes two to make a relationship, and understanding what that one person really is and their appetite for developing that relationship is the factor there.
Brett, it's so good to have HARO back. As a former journalist, I really appreciate the work you're doing. And as a small business owner, I've got to look at featured.com and check it out and see if it's something we can tap into potentially.
Yeah, it's so much fun doing HARO. It is
Yeah.
reviving it after a year hiatus and bringing it back, and people are really excited about it. So yeah, appreciate the opportunity to jump in and make a difference.
Thanks for your time.
You're welcome.